In 2024, budget carrier Cebu Pacific faced a problem that had nothing to do with weak demand. It warned that up to 20 of its Airbus A320neo family jets could be taken out of service at different points through the year because of issues tied to Pratt & Whitney's PW1100G geared turbofan engines. For Cebu, that could mean roughly 1/5 to 1/4 of its fleet not flying at times, even as travel demand stayed strong. This also wasn't just a Cebu story. The same engine family powers Airbus A320neo and A321neo jets around the world, and the disruption spread across airlines and regions. By June 2024, IATA said around 637 of 1,334 PW-GTF-powered aircraft were grounded, waiting for inspection or repair. The cause was tiny, a contamination in powdered metal used to make certain engine discs, but the impact was massive. Jets sat parked, routes were trimmed, and airlines scrambled to find spare engines and repair slots. And there's a twist that matters for money. Many airlines don't treat engines as a simple buy-it-once item. They often pay for engine support under long-term, usage-based agreements. When planes stop flying, what happens to those payments depends on the contract, and the fine print can matter as much as the engine itself. Power by the hour, PBH, also called pay per hour or rate per flying hour by different companies, is a simple but important idea. Instead of paying unpredictable lump sum overhaul bills when an engine comes due, an airline pays a set rate linked to the hours the engine operates. In the cleanest version, you pay only for the hours you fly. In other versions, there can be fees, reserves, or minimums that change the math. Either way, the goal is the same: make maintenance costs more predictable and move some risk away from the airline. The idea traces back to Rolls-Royce's power by the hour concept from the early 1960s, designed to align the interests of the engine maker and the operator. If the engine runs reliably, the airline earns money and the provider earns money. If it spends too much time in the shop, the provider feels that pain too. The timing of this model's rise isn't random. Modern jet engines are built for fuel savings and lower emissions, but they are also complex machines with exotic materials and tight tolerances. New designs like Pratt & Whitney's geared turbofan promised major efficiency gains, which is why airlines rushed to buy A320neo family jets in huge numbers. But when new technology meets real-world flying, problems can show up that no one predicted. Under a power-by-the-hour style deal, often marketed under branded names like Pratt & Whitney's EngineWise, the airline is not just buying metal, it's buying a package of maintenance support that is priced around how the engines are used. In Cebu Pacific's case, Pratt & Whitney later described its EngineWise agreement as one that aligns maintenance cost to engine utilization, with long-term support built in. The point is not that the airline rents the engine in a simple sense. The point is that it buys a service structure where maintenance planning and costs are meant to follow flying hours. The concept started with Rolls-Royce's power-by-the-hour trademark, but today most major engine makers offer versions of the same idea. Rolls-Royce uses programs like TotalCare, and Pratt & Whitney uses programs like EngineWise and ESP-style support offerings depending on the engine and customer. Across the industry, these maintenance programs have become normal, especially for new jets. Airlines like them because they turn surprise maintenance shocks into something closer to a budget line. Engine makers like them because long-term service is a steady revenue stream and keeps customers tied into their support networks. It also changes how airlines operate. Instead of building giant in-house overhaul shops and buying large stocks of spare engines, many airlines lean more on the OEM and its maintenance network, though how much depends on the airline's size, strategy, and contract terms. The economics are clear when things are normal. A modern commercial jet engine can cost around $10 to $15 million, and over its life, maintenance can cost even more than the purchase price. A single unplanned engine removal can be extremely expensive once you add logistics, shop work, and replacement lift. Power-by-the-hour programs try to turn those sudden megabills into a steady rate tied to flying. Airlines get predictability and cash flow stability. Engine makers get predictable service revenue. And both sides, in theory, have the same incentive: keep the engine on wing and flying. It sounds like a win-win, until a flaw appears that forces a large share of the fleet into the shop at the same time. To understand why airlines embraced power by the hour, consider the old method. Traditionally, airlines either paid for overhauls as they happened or built large maintenance plans that still came with big spikes. When an engine needed a heavy shop visit, the airline wrote a very large check. For a low-cost airline with thin margins, a few major engine events in the wrong quarter could wipe out profits. PBH changed the shape of that risk. First, it can shift part of the reliability risk away from the airline. Under many pay-per-hour agreements, the airline's cost per hour is set in advance, while the provider carries much of the burden if an engine turns out to need more shop work than expected. That's why these deals are especially attractive for new engine programs. The Pratt & Whitney GTF, for example, was a leap in design, using a geared fan system to improve efficiency. Airlines like Cebu Pacific and Indigo ordered large numbers of these aircraft to cut fuel costs. But early in-service years for new engines can bring teething troubles, including durability issues that show up after real airline use. A long-term support agreement can soften the blow because the airline isn't writing a brand new, unpredictable check every time the engine needs work. The airline still suffers from lost flying time, but the maintenance bill itself is less of a shock. Second, PBH helps with budgeting and cash flow. Instead of lumpy expenses, the cost of engine maintenance is turned into a planned, usage-linked rate. That matters for low-cost carriers, which live and die by costs per seat. If you can estimate your engine support cost per flight hour, you can price routes and plan growth with more confidence. A carrier like Cebu Pacific can build schedules around an expected utilization level and forecast engine-related spending more smoothly than under pure pay when it breaks systems. Many agreements also come with technical support, access to fleet data tools, and in some cases, help with spare engine planning or maintenance slot coordination. None of that eliminates downtime in a crisis, but it is part of why airlines sign up. From a capital standpoint, this model also fits modern airline finance. Many low-cost carriers lease aircraft rather than buy them outright. Engines are often financed, leased, or supported through layered agreements that shift costs into operating expenses instead of large upfront capital spending. It's like paying for a service plan rather than building your own repair factory. In boom times, OEMs benefit too. Service revenue becomes a major part of the business, and it can be more stable than one-time engine sales. That's why people in aviation often say the long-term services contract can be as important as the engine order itself. But when a major defect hits, the same system that makes costs predictable can become messy, because now the key problem is not the bill, it is the lack of available engines and repair capacity. In 2023, the aviation world learned how fast a small materials problem could turn into a global operational crisis. RTX, the parent company of Pratt & Whitney, said a rare condition in powder metal used to manufacture certain GTF engine parts could lead to microscopic cracks in components such as turbine and compressor discs. What followed was not a normal reliability issue where a few airlines deal with a few engines. It became a coordinated inspection and repair campaign across the global fleet. In September 2023, RTX said it would need to remove and inspect about 600 to 700 engines between 2023 and 2026. The same update warned that shop time that had once been expected around 60 days could stretch to as much as 300 days per engine. RTX also said an average of about 350 aircraft could be grounded per year through 2026, with as many as 650 aircraft sitting idle in the first half of 2024. IATA's own snapshot in late June 2024 put the disruption in stark numbers. Around 637 of 1,334 PWG-TF-powered aircraft were grounded awaiting inspection, and roughly 1,200 engines were thought to be affected. In simple terms, that is a major slice of the active fleet losing months of flying time, not because airlines didn't want to fly, but because the engines had to be pulled and checked. Cebu Pacific became one of the clearest examples in Asia. In late 2023, its CEO said the PW1100G issues had unexpectedly confounded the airline and forced it to plan 2024 capacity growth more modestly than it had hoped. Cebu expected to have 10 PW1100G-powered jets grounded in January 2024 alone, and warned that as many as 20 aircraft could be taken out of operations through 2024. At the time, fleet data showed Cebu had 13 A320neos and 11 A321neos in service, 24 A320neo family jets that rely on those engines, and the airline projected ending 2023 with 79 aircraft and ending 2024 with 92. Even with planned fleet growth, losing up to 20 neo family aircraft at points in the year is a major hit to a low-cost carrier that depends on high aircraft use. Cebu said it was working to protect operations by securing leases for aircraft and engines, but it also made clear that growth targets had to be adjusted because engines, repair slots, and parts were not always available when needed. Cebu was not alone. Indigo, the largest airline in India, said in late 2023 that the problem would force it to ground more than 30 A320neo family jets in the first quarter of 2024. Later, Indigo said it expected dozens of aircraft to be grounded in a quarter and moved to keep or extend leases on older aircraft and bring in additional leased planes to cover capacity. In Europe, Wizz Air, one of the most exposed carriers because of its heavy reliance on A320neo family jets, has repeatedly warned about the impact. By May 2025, Wizz said it had 37 aircraft grounded, and it expected 34 to remain grounded by the middle of its financial year 2026. The financial impact was visible too. Wizz reported operating profit for the year ended March 31, 2025, fell about 62% to €167.5 million, with the grounding issue a major factor in the disruption. Across the Atlantic, Spirit Airlines also highlighted the same reality. Aircraft can't earn money when they can't fly. Spirit reached compensation arrangements tied to its grounded aircraft, including monthly credits linked to engines or aircraft on the ground. Different airlines had different deals, but the pattern was consistent. When a new engine design is widely adopted, a systemic flaw doesn't stay local. It becomes a global capacity problem. Now the power-by-the-hour model faced a stress test. On paper, PBH-style agreements are meant to share risk. In practice, this crisis created costs and pain for both sides. RTX disclosed gross costs of about $6 to $7 billion to deal with the issue, and said it expected up to a roughly $3 to $3.5 billion pre-tax hit to profits over several years. A large share of those costs was linked to supporting customers, compensation, logistics, and making airlines whole as much as possible, rather than just the physical act of repairing metal. The engine maker didn't simply lose some revenue. It also had to pay to fix and support, while airlines lost capacity and faced higher costs. Cebu's case shows how these deals evolved. In June 2025, Pratt & Whitney and Cebu Pacific announced a long-term EngineWise maintenance services agreement for Cebu's GTF engine fleet, described as aligning maintenance costs to engine utilization and supporting the airline's long-term fleet plans. Cebu's CEO also said the GTF had enabled up to a 20% reduction in fuel burn compared to previous generation engines, which is why airlines still want these jets despite the pain. Around the same time, Cebu secured additional support in the form of spare engines as part of compensation related to the disruption. Help that could be turned into real operational relief by getting grounded aircraft back into service faster. But no support package can instantly solve a global repair bottleneck. Building engines and repairing complex parts takes time, and repair shops have limited slots. That meant airlines still had to live with aircraft on-ground problems for months, sometimes longer. For the public, it often looked like simple schedule changes or aircraft swaps. For airline planners, it was a constant battle for maintenance capacity, spare engines, and predictable timelines. Groups like IATA stepped in, not as regulators, but as industry advocates, asking airport slot coordinators to grant relief. Under normal slot rules, airlines can lose valuable takeoff and landing rights if they don't use them often enough. IATA argued that these cancellations were outside airline control and requested justified non-utilization of slots eligibility so airlines wouldn't be punished for an engine crisis they didn't cause. That detail matters because it shows how deep the disruption ran. It wasn't just about engines. It spilled into airport policy, schedules, and long-term network planning. When airlines sign long-term engine maintenance agreements, the headline promise is simple: predictable costs per hour and reliable support. The problem is that not all power-by-the-hour contracts work the same way. Some programs, including some OEM offerings, are marketed with no annual minimum flying hour requirements, meaning you pay only for the hours you fly. Other agreements, especially certain leasing structures, third-party maintenance plans, or older contract designs, can include minimums, fixed fees, enrollment charges, or reserve requirements that don't fully disappear when flying stops. That's why aviation lawyers, and even engine makers themselves, tell customers to ask one blunt question before signing: is there a minimum hours clause? And if so, what happens if you can't fly? In normal conditions, minimums rarely feel like a problem because airlines plan to fly their aircraft hard. Low-cost carriers in particular aim for high daily use, so they usually meet any minimum hour targets without thinking about it. But a mass grounding flips the math. If engines are pulled for inspection and aircraft are parked for months, revenue drops fast. Meanwhile, some costs can keep running, depending on contract structure. Even if an engine program has no annual minimums, airlines can still face costs tied to the broader setup: lease payments on aircraft, financing charges, spare engine leases, and the expense of finding replacement lift. This is the double hit that makes crises like this so dangerous for airlines. Many carriers lease aircraft from lessors, which means they pay monthly rent whether the plane flies or not. That works in normal times because the aircraft earns revenue every day. But when a chunk of the fleet is parked, lease costs don't pause. Add the disruption costs, crew and schedule changes, higher wet lease rates if you can find aircraft, and higher maintenance logistics, and cash flow pressure builds quickly. You could see this strain in airline results. Cebu Air's net income fell sharply in 2024, with higher costs and disruption weighing on results. Later, Cebu's profits rebounded as travel demand stayed strong and compensation and operational support began to land in more concrete ways, including spare engines. In fact, that's the key point. Compensation often comes, but it doesn't arrive evenly, and it doesn't always arrive as cash. Airlines may receive credits, discounts, service support, or hardware like spare engines. Those things matter, but they don't instantly replace the revenue lost when aircraft are grounded for months. From the engine maker's side, PBH-style economics also cut both ways. If the engine isn't flying, the provider may not collect normal hourly revenue, while still carrying huge costs for inspections, repairs, and customer support. That is part of why the crisis has dragged on with so much pressure from both sides. Airlines want engines back now. The OEM wants to clear the backlog because every grounded engine damages relationships, damages future sales, and raises costs. The result is a negotiation-heavy environment where airlines push for compensation and better support, and engine makers push to expand repair capacity and smooth the recovery over years, not weeks. The real lesson is not that PBH is good or bad. It is that contracts matter most when something goes wrong at scale. An airline can sign a deal believing it has cost protection, only to learn later that the agreement was designed for normal volatility, not for a systemic flaw grounding hundreds of aircraft worldwide at the same time. After this crisis, airlines will likely push for clearer terms on what happens in extraordinary events, how quickly spares must be provided, what the compensation triggers are, and whether any minimums or fixed charges get waived when the aircraft is grounded for reasons outside airline control. The power-by-the-hour model changed modern aviation, especially for low-cost carriers. It helped turn the most expensive part of an aircraft, the engine, into something closer to a planned service cost. It allowed airlines to operate high-tech engines without taking the full shock of unpredictable overhaul bills, and it tied the engine maker more closely to the real performance of the product in airline service. For years, that alignment helped airlines expand faster and manage risk better. Then, the GTF crisis showed the limits. A tiny flaw in powder metal triggered an inspection and repair wave that grounded aircraft worldwide, stretched engine shop time from weeks into many months, and forced airlines to cut growth plans even when passengers were ready to fly. Cebu Pacific's warning, up to 20 A320neo family aircraft out of service through 2024, became a symbol of how a low-cost carrier can be ready to grow and still be held back by a single technical choke point. Across the industry, the same pattern appeared. Wizz Air, Indigo, Spirit, and many others all faced the same problem in different markets because the engine was the same. In many ways, the risk-sharing system did what it was supposed to do. RTX set aside billions to deal with the issue, and airlines negotiated support, credits, and spare engines. IATA even pushed for slot relief, so airlines wouldn't be punished for an engine crisis outside their control. But the crisis also taught airlines a hard lesson about concentration risk and contract fine print. When an airline leans heavily on one engine type, a single flaw can become a fleet-wide shutdown. And when aircraft stop flying, some costs can continue, depending on the exact structure of leases and maintenance agreements. Power by the hour is not going away. The economics are too useful, and airlines still want the fuel savings that new engines can deliver. Cebu itself pointed to up to 20% lower fuel burn versus older engines. But the GTF episode will be remembered as the moment the industry learned to ask tougher questions. How many spare engines exist? How fast can shops turn engines around? What does the contract say if a systemic defect grounds the fleet? In an industry with slim margins, those details can decide whether a carrier keeps growing or gets stuck. The GTF debacle of 2023 to 2026 will stand as a case study in what happens when a great business model meets a worst-case technical problem. It proved that even when airlines rent support and buy engines as a service, they can't outsource resilience. The metal may be tiny, but the consequences are massive. And as Cebu Pacific's story showed, the engine you thought you had under control can end up controlling you, unless you plan for the day it all goes wrong.